This is an audiovisual recording of installation, configuration, and use of the emulation component from OutsideView Web. Let's start by having a look at this folder on my laptop, which is the CD image of the OutsideView Web product. In it, you will notice that there is an installation guide. There's also a manuals folder. If we go to the manuals folder, you'll see the OutsideView Web install guide. In the OutsideView Web install guide, you have detailed information about a variety of components to install into a variety of environments. Here on page 19, for instance, you see installing the terminal emulation component into a Java Tomcat environment. And that's what I'm running on my example machine here. Let's go have a look at that. On my D drive, I have Tomcat 5.5 with just a very generic out-of-the-box installation. And our OV Web install manual says, make sure you've got your latest JDK, which is the Sun Java Development Kit, and I have in 15008, which is the latest I could find. It says, ensure the Tomcat environment is running. And this machine is named GMH Laptop, and on GMH Laptop, the port 8080, we're running the Tomcat. Then go back to the CD image and go to Install, Emulation, Emulation.exe. So CD, Install, Emulation folder. And again, we have a variety of mechanisms with which to install, but into a Windows environment, we can just click on the Emulation.exe, as opposed to unzipping or using jar files in other environments, such as ITP web server. The Install Shield wizard begins to search for the proper Java environment, which on this machine is Java 1.5. Once it finds that environment, it initializes the installer within that JRE, or Java Runtime Environment. To install, we go through the introductory screen, we accept the terms of the license agreement if we choose to, and we tell the emulation component where to install. In a Tomcat environment, you can locate two virtual directories, but it's easier to just drop them into the Web Apps folder. So we will go to the Web Apps, we'll create a folder named ovweb_emulation, or have it placed there. So and just to see if I match the documentation, OV Web Emulation. Okay. This is not mandatory, this name, but it's a choice. This is an example. It says that is where it will install it, and I say go ahead and do that. It begins what is essentially a copy operation. Now, one of the things about Tomcat is that it does not publish a new application automatically. Certain steps have to be taken. As described on page 20 of the OutsideView Web Installation Guide, before this emulation folder becomes a public browsable folder, it must have a webinf subfolder and a web.xml file in it. The easiest way to do that, as described in the manual, is to go find a generic web.xml file, which in this clean install, we can find under webinf of the root folder. And Tomcat is case sensitive, by the way. We've placed in the web.xml file. Now we want to have it have appropriate content. Essentially, I will have it describe itself not as welcome to Tomcat, but as OutsideView Web Emulation. And there are no servlets associated with this component. So we get rid of that. We save it. We close the web.xml file contained here. We stop and start the Java or the Tomcat web server. And what that has done is it has published this OV web emulation because it has a webinf folder. You'll see here that this running component of the web server now has a subfolder of session, which we've made browsable. Here is where we would place session definition files. In our first module of creating sessions to the administrative web station, you might recall that we created some sessions and they were cached on my machine in the Sun cache location, which is Documents and Settings, Username, OutsideView Web, Upload Session, as you see here, where we built 6530 plain.html, which is the emulation startup file, and 6530 plain.cpi, which is the configuration information file. If we take these two files, we can FTP them to the session folder over on our web server, or because this is a Windows box, we can just copy it over, cut and paste. Tomcat, web apps, OutsideView web emulation, session, paste. Now, if we go to our web server, those files are there, and a webmaster would actually place this startup file under a web page and a clickable button and so on. But essentially what happens is a user browses to a URL such as this one or a web page that links to it. They click on this file, and in the body or in the content of this file it says, hey, I am a 6530 emulation type. So on the client workstation, download into that client workstation's Java virtual machine a 6530 terminal emulation program or applet, and then fire it off and feed to it the session parameters contained in this HTML file. And further, this HTML file references the fact that there is a preference file, or not a preference file, but a configuration file associated with it. That took a long time to say, but a short time to, it only takes a short time to do. So we click on plain.html, it fires up that run environment and starts up the session just this simply. This session was started in conformance with the definitions we gave in the earlier module where we created a session through an admin web station. If we chose to, just to quickly run through that as a review, start, programs, OutsideView web station, administrative web station, we could quickly create another terminal session. Oh, 6530 number 2. Going to S72K dot, whichever host this would be. In this case, we will have it embedded in the browser window. We will have basic level, and we won't even display the session status bar. To configure it, we can test it out offline, essentially see it this way, and let's make no changes. Cancel and exit the session. We've got the HTML file, we just don't have the CPI file at this point. What browsers do we want to use it for? We'll send it to the web cache area. We'll also permanently save it within the admin web station. So now we know that I was making a mistake. The session file we just created was the 6530-2.html. So we can take it, edit, copy, go to the web server session folder, and go paste. And that's all that's necessary. Now if we go back to our Tomcat, OutsideView Web Emulation session folder, we see the new startup file, and again this would be placed as a link under a web page button by a webmaster, but someone would go to the URL, they'll see a page, they'll click on a button, and in this case the session has started as a frame inside the web server, giving you very tight control. You don't see status, you don't see who you're connected to, you don't have toolbars or anything like that created. So these two contrasting sessions show you different levels of control and different levels of implementation with the OutsideView Web tool. Oops, I was pointing to the wrong container. So let's run the plane, where it spawns a separate window where we have administrative controls, we have a status bar, we have a toolbar, we have function buttons, versus an embedded one which is very tightly controlled. So I think you can see how quick and easy it is to deploy the sessions, and that you have a good range of control over the options for your end users. That completes this module.